Right. No, it's telling me no. Can you find a link?
Okay.
Ooh, you painted your nails.
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
Oh, fancy.
Just one side?
Yeah, I tried both. I did like black here and white here, and I didn't like the way it looked. No, I did white here and black here, and I thought the black was
Next time you
a
should
little
tell
too
her
much.
to paint your nails.
I will. I'll even
Maybe.
make them acrylic. I look like saying this one too, but
I
yeah.
think I'm okay. I don't know if I want acrylic, but
He's
You want to paint your
"I'm not
nails? You can go acrylic.
I like the subtlety of it.
Oh,
Mother.
somebody's angry.
It's a Karen. Yeah, it's a Karen.
I hate y'all. I hate it here,
Yeah,
so
it's a
call me
Karen.
out. Who is it? I know it's obviously none of us, but
Sounds like somebody who's listening to the live stream.
sounds like a family that we don't know about. Yay! Oh, that's us. Never mind. Yes.
Are we live or-
I sent out the link to everybody already, so. Hi, Rick.
Hello, Rick. The
Hi, Rick.
clicking is the typing on the keyboard. So we're going to get started, everybody. We're very sorry for all of the technical difficulties that have led us here and led us to these delays. However, we are going to get started. Like it says in the chat, today is going to be it can be as self-guided as you'd like. There is a PowerPoint in the resources folder, and that resources folder will have all the educational materials from all of our classes every week going forward. There's stuff in there from the first week. I need to go back and add some of the stuff that we've gone over in previous weeks. But that way it's something that we have access to every single week. And that way we can go back and look at stuff that we might be something that we want to discuss later with other people, or just something that we want to go back and reference for ourselves. Like this week will be very important to reference for ourselves because we're going to be talking about knowing our rights and our interactions with police. So our objective for our discussion today is going to be what rights do we have when we are interacting with police? And so understanding those rights is going to be our goal for today. So we're going to discuss interactions with police in terms of being stopped on the street or being stopped in your car, and then even during protests as well, just so you are aware of what roles you have and what protections you have under the law. Okay, so just some norms, just so we can go over those very quickly because we've gone over them every week, but just so we're always aware of it, is making sure everyone is a learner, everyone's acting like a learner, nobody here knows more than anybody else, nobody here is the absolute guiding force of knowledge over everybody else, because we should always be learning all of the time. It's a safe space, and we are going to respect each other's point of views, but then we will also challenge each other when we want to challenge each other. That way we can all grow and learn at the same time. Those are our main norms. And then if you have anything that you think is important, you can chat that in as well.
I have it on.
Does anybody here like to add to the norms that we've thought about over the past few weeks? All right, splendid. Okay, so today, the structure of the class is going to be going through that PowerPoint, essentially. There's not going to be as much opportunity for discussion as there typically is, just because it's very straightforward and understanding what kind of rights we have. But I did want to start this off by asking if there's anybody here who has any personal experiences with dealing with the police, or had an interaction with the police where you weren't sure what to do, or you felt maybe the police were taking advantage of the situation. We don't have a lot of us in person today, but we can discuss that if anybody would like to share a story, and then if you'd like to chat that in as well, if you'd like to bring up an interaction that you had with the police, and whether or not you knew your rights and how to exercise them. Is there anybody here who would like to share?
No.
All four of us, anybody?
Technically 3 of us.
Yes, get ready to take notes, kids. You don't have to take notes, however, because we have a folder now, and you can go reference that folder whenever you want, and you have technology. And you don't have to waste your pen ink or your pencil lead, because that is going to get more expensive the next few years. You wait when they raise the prices of pen ink and pencil lead. All right. So any stories anybody wanted to share online, feel free to chat those in. And because it's important to understand, some experiences that we've had and what we've had to, and, if we felt overwhelmed or if we felt that we didn't know how to interact with the police, and having that understanding is important, just to see how we can react differently the next time that we have interactions with police. Okay, so we're going to be following the PowerPoint, like I said. So those of you at home, you can go look in that folder, and it's going to be the Know Your Rights PowerPoint. It says Know Your Rights with an exclamation mark. That exclamation mark is very important, because if you find the one without the exclamation mark, it might be talking about something totally different. So go ahead and start on that PowerPoint, and then the video link for today is on there. We're going to mute the microphone. That way we're not getting copyrighted on the stream. Is that okay, Dennis?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, we don't want to get copyrighted on our stream for reproducing material that isn't ours. So that way you at home can just follow along with watching the video, and then we'll discuss it a little bit after, see if there's anything surprising. And then from there, we'll talk about the rest of the material that's on the PowerPoint. So those of you at home can go ahead and click on the video link, and then we'll be back together as a group in about 38 minutes or so. Okay, the link is also in the chat for those of you who might be confused trying to find it. It's tinyurl.com/education over. I do want to give a quick disclaimer. This video is a little corny and a little maybe outdated. However, I think it gives useful information, and it can be kind of entertaining in how corny it is as well. So just bear that in mind while you're watching it, and take it with a lens of, let me be entertained while I am informed. Because it is a little weird at sometimes. But that being said, go on and get started. So I just wanted to come back real quick. Rick asked the question, are we pausing at all during the video to discuss any key points? I was going to leave that to discussion of the people in the chat. Because we are mostly digital today, I felt it would be difficult to pause at different parts because people will be kind of watching the video on their own computers. So I wasn't planning to pause at all. However, if you do want to, if you have some thoughts while you're watching the video, please type those into the chat so we can discuss those as well. And then we can talk about that at the end. That way everyone's more on the same page and we can all just kind of come back together as one after the video. Thank you for the question, Rick. I wanted to pause real quick on the video and just address like that first part of it. Like I said, it is a little bit of an older video. And one of the things that I do recognize and I do want to like voice is that there was a part of the video where it sounds like the video is just, we'll be nice to the police and you won't have any problems. I promise that's not the entirety of the video. I will admit that that is a part of the video that I do not 100% agree with, because obviously, as we have seen, being polite to the police is not enough. Just like the point of that first part of the video and like that part he's addressing is really a small bit part of the video where he's saying, if you address, being calm, if you start by being calm, there is a higher chance of avoiding escalating the situation. And then also being calm allows you to be in the right, and there being very little, evidence that they can use against you to say, oh, well, this person was resisting, or, oh, this person was aggressive from the beginning. But from a legal standpoint, if you're calm as soon as the officer addresses you and you are, acting in professionalism in a way that a lot of officers do not themselves, then it automatically puts you a step ahead of the officer that you're interacting with. And so just like having that step ahead by being calm yourself and being at least professional, you don't have to be 100% polite to the officer, because a lot of the times police officers do not act in a way where they deserve to be 100% polite with and deserve your 100% respect as soon as you see them. But being professional in the way that you can definitely gives you a leg up in the eyes of the law. That way there's literally nothing against you that they have to say, well, this person did this or this person did that. That way you're in the right. And then if you take it to court, then it's, I did everything I was supposed to. This officer is the one who was in the wrong the entire time. But I do want to point out that I don't want this video to come across as, this class is about, well, just be nice to the officers and they'll be nice to you back, because that is not the point of the video. I just think that the legal professional who's addressing the topic is someone who has a lot of knowledge and addresses a lot of important points in the rest of the video as well. I just wanted to voice that real quick before we continue. Okay, so we're done with the video on our end. If you need more time on the video, then you can keep watching it. If you're done with the video, then you can stop watching it because you're done. So, hope you all appreciated the acting. Leonardo DiCaprio was actually an extra in that film, and he didn't win an Oscar for his performance in the background. And then two of the other characters won Oscars for their performances as well. That was 2003, maybe? No, so like I said at the beginning, take something with a grain of salt. I thought it was a good video with a nice balance of factual knowledge coming from a lawyer, but it also is a little bit dated, yes, and also does have some parts where it raises a few questions, especially today where it's not always as simple as, well, as long as you say no, sir, then they won't bother you, because obviously we don't see it that way. But like I said before, it's about protecting yourself in front of the law. And like the lawyer said at one part, if you, for example, if you deny the search, then that makes an easier case for him in court because whatever they find during the search, you didn't consent to it. So whatever they found, they can't use. And so it's about protecting yourself in the eyes of the law. And if you do end up going to court, then it's much easier to get a case thrown out. If you knew your rights and the officer was the one acting with misconduct or not following the protocol as they should be following them. So that being said, are there any questions or any discussion points that anybody wants to bring up either here in person or on the chat? Maybe like problems you had with the video or things you found interesting or things where you're like, wait a minute. So let's give some time for that if there's anybody who would like to raise one of those points.
Why are you guys looking at me?
Well,
Do all police officers have violent narcissistic tendencies that we should handle carefully and with kid gloves and walk the thin ice around them?
So yes, that's a good question because yes, that is something that was portrayed in the video where it's, well, be super nice to the officers and be very careful with everything you say. I think your takeaway from the video should be knowing your rights. The takeaway doesn't have to be nice to them and don't hurt their feelings or whatever. And like you said, are all officers narcissistic and whatnot? They might be, but also like you don't have to act as if, if they do something wrong, it's on them. But then you also don't have to act afraid of them and whatnot. Like,
Wait, Natani has a question. She said, do we know what the Nevada law is regarding to having to give your name?
oh, okay, great question. So that is something I did want to address. That is in the PowerPoint as well, I believe. Might not be specific to Nevada in the PowerPoint. So in Nevada, there was a court case that said that you do have to give your name on the street if a police officer asks for it. However, you do not have to give your ID unless you're driving. So if they stop you on the street, on the sidewalk, protest, whatever, and they ask for your name, you do have to give their name according to the Supreme Court case that happened in 2004. But you don't have to give them your ID unless you're driving and then they require a license.
We have a good question because I've been stopped by like police like from walking on the street because
Yeah.
I look like a suspect.
Mhm.
It's happened where like I live in areas where like they ask for my ID because I fit a description. Can I like say no to that?
So you can ask, like they said in the video, am I being detained or am I free to go? They did say the part where it gets foggy is the reasonable suspicion on the part of the officers and how much they can prove, because the law is obviously going to be on their side most of the time with the way our system works. And so they could say reasonable suspicion is this. So if you fit the description, technically that does fall under reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion is supposed to be they have factual knowledge or factual reasoning behind why they're stopping you. So it can't just be assumptions. It can't just be, well, you look like somebody who was. It has to be, well, the description is this based on facts, and based on facts, you match this description. And that's the only way that they're supposed to be able to use reasonable suspicion, just to have that in mind.
Natani said, he said never touch the police because he can be charged. But I feel like I read recently that if they're illegally detaining someone, we can defend ourselves for them. No?
That's a good question. That is something that I will have to look up. I don't want to give you incorrect information. Yeah, in the video, his point was that it's a felony charge if you put your hands on the officer. which again, like I said, like our system is built a certain way to where it is going to be on their side and defend them even if they're more in the wrong than us. So I would say that's something to be careful of. But if it is an instance where using excessive force, there might be a difference in that as well.
Aston says, so to be sure I understand correctly, officers can lie to you and trick you legally, and whatever tactics they use to trip you up cannot be used against them in court if you're innocent. I don't know if I worded that correctly. That's what she said.
The police don't actually legally have to know what they're arresting you for. They don't have to know the law to arrest you under that law.
Yeah. And in the video, it did say like there is also like the concept of entrapment, and so they're not supposed to be able to entrap you into a crime, if I'm correct. Or
I think that's just a widely held urban myth.
is it?
Yeah.
That, like, if I ask you if you're a cop, you gotta tell me.
Oh, not necessarily. Okay, yeah, like like if they're undercover type of thing. So yeah, as far as I know, yes, they can lie to you, and they don't have to be 100% truthful, and can trick you into giving an answer that they want to hear. So that, like was said in the video, can be avoided just by refusing to answer the questions. And if they say something that you believe is false, then you could say, "No, officer, I also refuse to answer. I would not like to answer any of these questions. Am I free to go?"
So Rick said, yeah, because they did this steward dirty with the weed under the couch. They took full advantage on that one. And then Caston said, oh God, I'm screwed. So
Yeah, Miss Stewart got played. It was, however, very unfair but she did let them into the house, and that's why it's important to, whether it be your car or your house, you don't have to let them search you if they don't have a warrant to do so.
So the major takeaway is never consent to shit.
Yeah, never consent to anything unless they have a warrant, or unless you have a lawyer present. Your lawyer says it's okay. But yeah, you don't have to consent to anything that you want to consent to.
Another one that I just remember recently watching on the Netflix series for undocumented people, that if they have a warrant, they have to legally show you the document, not just verbally saying that they have a warrant in order for them to arrest you. You have to see it.
and it has to be signed by the judge.
And it has
yeah.
to be signed by the judge. So you have to pay attention to that. If they say they have a warrant and they can come inside the house, you should ask to physically see the document in order for them to enter your home and or your vehicle.
Interesting. Okay, so
You got it. You good. You're the teacher, Tyler. I was
no,
going to say Caston's thing. But she said, this might be stupid, but is a warrant a piece of paper that they presented to you?
Yes, that is correct. It is a warrant is a piece of paper where a judge has to sign off saying that you are being legally detained by police for whatever action. If it's because you have unpaid parking ticket, it has to specify why you're getting detained, and it also should say further information on the arrest. It also should be signed by the sheriff, and also I think it has to be signed by you if they physically present you with a warrant. And just for a fun fact, if the name is incorrect on the warrant, like they fuck up on the spelling of your name, you can fight that and say it's spelled wrong, so you can't arrest me because my ID says something else. Just as a quick factoid.
yeah, that's good to know. So based on the stuff that I'm reading, just in reference to what was said earlier, the police are able to lie to you. It's legal for them to lie to you.
Well, that's good.
Caston asked, at what point can I ask, am I being detained or am I free to go?
So you can ask that as soon as the interaction starts, as long as they have not charged you with a crime. So you can ask them that at any point. If they stop you on the street and you say, as soon as they say, hello, how are you today? You can say, am I being detained? And if they say no, then you can say, am I free to go? And then you would be free to go because you're not being detained.
Yep.
Yeah. So I can start at any point.
Ooh, you also have, since body cams are a huge thing, you also have the right to ask them if they are recording the interaction just for your own safety. If they say yes, then you have the legal right to obtain that video information. Of course, with Nevada law, we know that we have to pay a certain fine for that, but it doesn't necessarily matter. So if you see that a body cam is on a police officer, ask them immediately if if this is being recorded for your own safety.
Yeah, and then there are ways also in Nevada or in Las Vegas specifically, to obtain your body cam footage. There was an article a few months ago about them raising the prices on being able to see that footage, but that is something you can request as public record. The body cameras are new though, in terms of under the law. They've only existed for a few years. So some of the laws and regulations around body cam footage and whether or not it's public record is still a little bit fuzzy. But that is something that you do have the ability to access through the police department office.
Casson just asked the question. Oh, that's smart. She said, if they say that I'm not recording, can I make them? Yes, you can. You have the legal right to say if they can record the interaction for your own safety. You have the legal right to do that. That's why they have the body cams. Of course, if they refuse not to, you should ask why they are refusing to record you, so you at least have that documentation or that interaction, at least for your own safety. If they say that it's because it's not working, you can also tell that to your lawyer and say the officer said that the camera wasn't working, and then the lawyer could see whether or not that could be true.
Okay, before we move on, are there any other questions regarding the video, questions or comments? Okay. So from here, we're just going to look at the other files that are in the folder. And in that folder, on that PowerPoint, excuse me, the files you can look at as a whole later, but on the PowerPoint, there's just some small parts, some clips from those different documents that can help you out. So more information can be found at flexyrights.org. That was the organization that leads the video that we just watched. And then they also have a police reporting website called openpolice.org. And there you can report police misconduct, and then they have like a national record of it. And that's more like a national database. But flexyrights.org gives you a little bit more resources and some videos and some articles to read as well. Okay, so on the PowerPoint, we're going to start with one of the first references from the material that is in the folder. So this is some of it's kind of repetitive from the video, but on the slide, the first slide talks about questioning. And so the question is, what kind of law enforcement officers might try to question me? And then this talks about a variety of different organizations within the law enforcement. It can be law enforcement officers locally, state, terrorism task force members, Department of Homeland Security, Immigration Customs Enforcement, Border Patrol, things like that. So that is good to know, either for like an airport or with ICE being as much of a problem as they have been, especially recently.
Oh, for ICE information, because a lot of people ask us this, or at least me, because I know everything that has to do with ICE.
Mhm.
If ICE stops, if they knock on your door, they have the legal right to say that they are police, because technically they are part of police enforcement. So I would just always ask and specify what part of the police department they are from, and they have to answer that they are from immigration. As soon as you have that information, you can ask why the hell they're at your house. With that information, if they say that they have a warrant for a specific person, if that person is not in your house, you can say they are not in the house, they no longer live there. You can make whatever excuse you would like. But even if they have a physical warrant, if that person is not at the house at that specific time, they do not have the right to be inside your home.
Cool. Thank you. And then there's also information in that folder as well. It's iamerica.org, I believe. And in that document, on that website, there's resources for how to interact with police in various situations. So whether it be stopped or police stopped on the street, stopped in your car, at home, and then there's also references for what happens if ICE comes to your door. And so that website has a lot of resources as well. Yeah, thank you, Leo. And so on that slide, the other question was, do I have to answer questions by law enforcement? And the answer is no, you have constitutional right to remain silent, as brought up in the video. And it's a good idea to talk to a lawyer before agreeing to answer questions.
Oh, if cops don't read you your Miranda rights, you have the right to like get out from jail or whatever they have you on. They have to read you your Miranda rights in order for them to book you for anything. If they do not read it or if they mispronounce anything, you have the right to get out of custody, out of police custody. It's part of everyone's rights.
So I had a question about that, just as like an open discussion. I saw something today where it's like you don't necessarily rely on that just because even if they don't read you your rights, I saw like even if they don't read you your rights, you still have them, but that's not necessarily something that you can rely on is if they don't read you your rights and you're free.
That's actually a law that's by like even in the Supreme Court, that's a ruling.
Okay.
They are legally obligated to tell you your rights.
Mhm.
If for whatever reason they don't tell you your rights while you're getting handcuffed and you're getting booked, you have the right to like call your lawyer in that moment and tell them they did not read me my Miranda rights, and from there on you can leave. They don't have the right to keep you inside jail or booking just because they didn't read it. So I don't know if like they've changed that, but I doubt it very much just because like it's a very basic thing. They're supposed to tell you that you have the right to remain silent, you have the right to a speedy trial, you have a right to a lawyer if you do not have one, and different others. I don't remember everything that's mentioned in the Miranda rights. Karen,
That's not what it says. It says Miranda rights are only required when the police are questioning you in the context of a criminal investigation and hope to or desire to use your statement as evidence against you. Otherwise, Miranda doesn't apply and they're not required to be read. This is what I found on the internet. So,
is it from like a actual
yeah, it
source?
says the MirandaWarning.org. It's an organization.
Let me see.
So-
They changed that recently.
But the wording of that also does say like if they say like in the context of a criminal investigation,
Yeah.
that could be something like, oh well, I'm arresting you. Technically, that's a
Yeah.
criminal
That's criminal.
investigation.
So, like the only reason why they're not supposed to read you your Miranda rights if you're not being detained. If you're not being detained, you don't need to be read your Miranda rights. But if you're being sent to jail or CCDC or whatever the situation may be, and they're booking you for something, that is technically speaking a criminal charge. Because even like if you jaywalk, that according to the law is a criminal charge, even if it's a misdemeanor. So you are supposed to be read your Miranda rights.
So also something to note is that if you aren't read your Miranda rights, anything that you say after being arrested can't be used against you.
That's correct.
And then a case can be dismissed apparently when they don't have enough evidence without the stuff that you said. So it looks like if there's still enough evidence and they didn't read you your rights, then they could still have you detained. But that's,
It's weird.
yeah, so it's very convoluted, but just like points for consideration, just to be aware of. Okay. And then next in the PowerPoint. Stops and arrests. What if a law enforcement officer stopped me on the street? Again, this is very similar to the video. If the officer, you can say, I don't want to talk to you, simply, and walk away calmly. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can ask if you're free to go. So cast in reference to your earlier question, as soon as they start talking to you, you can say, I don't want to talk to you. Like they said in the video as well, you don't have to answer the door. So you don't even have to initiate the interaction if they don't have a proper reason to be interacting with you. And then here's where it is, this might help clear up some confusion. It says being detained is not the same as being arrested, though an arrest could follow. The police can pat down the outside of your clothing only if they have reasonable suspicion, for example, an objective reason to suspect that you might be armed and dangerous. If they search more than this, say clearly, I do not consent to a search. So they can only pat you down if they think that you might be armed and if they have reasonable suspicion to think that you are armed. If they search any more, they say, I clearly do not want to be, I do not consent to a search. If they keep searching anyway, do not physically resist them. You do not need to answer any questions if you are being detained or arrested, except that the police may ask for your name once you have been detained. And you can be arrested in some states for refusing to provide it. You should, in Nevada, like we said earlier, like you need to provide your name. You don't necessarily have to provide your ID, but you do have to provide your name. Next question, what if law enforcement officers stop me in my car? This is on the next slide. Keep your hands where the police can see them. You must show your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance if you're asked. Officers can ask you to step outside of the car, so you can't refuse to get outside of the car. And they may separate passengers and drivers from each other to question them and compare their answers. Again, this is where it's important. Don't answer questions if you don't have to answer questions. And so just say, I would not like to answer any of these questions. And the police cannot search your car unless you give them your consent, which you do not have to give, or unless they have probable cause to believe that criminal activity is likely taking place, that you have been involved in a crime, or that you have evidence of a crime in your car. Probable cause is said knowledge of facts sufficient to support a reasonable belief. So they need facts. It can't be, well, you were driving in this part of town at this time, so that doesn't look too good. That's not enough. That they need to have facts that say, well, there was a crime over here. The suspect was driving a red car, and you're also driving a red car. That's the only time that they have probable cause. If you do not want your car searched, clearly state that you do not consent. The officer cannot use your refusal to give consent as a basis for doing a search. So like they said in the video, well, it looks like if you don't want me to search, you must be hiding something. So it looks like I'm going to search you still. If you don't consent, they can't do it. And they can't, it doesn't matter how badly they think you're doing something. Their assumptions don't matter. And then next question is, what should I do if law enforcement officers arrest me? The officer must advise you of your constitutional rights to remain silent to an attorney and to have an attorney appointed if you cannot afford one. You should exercise all of these rights even if the officers don't tell you about them. So these are good to know. That way you can go into an arrest understanding that you can be silent. You don't have to say anything without a lawyer present. Do not tell the police anything except your name. Anything else you say can and will be used against you. Ask to see a lawyer immediately. Within a reasonable amount of time after your arrest or booking, you have the right to a phone call. If you call your lawyer, law enforcement officers are not allowed to listen to your phone call. So if you're calling your lawyer and there's an officer around, they're legally not allowed to do that. They are allowed to listen to a phone call if you're making a phone call to like your mom or a friend or something in jail, but they cannot listen to phone calls with a lawyer. You must be taken to a judge as soon as possible, generally within 48 hours of your arrest at the latest. Okay, next slide. Do I have to answer questions if I have been arrested? No, if you're arrested, you do not have to answer any questions or volunteer any information. Ask for a lawyer right away, very similar to what we just addressed. What if I'm treated badly by law enforcement officers? Write down the officer's badge number, name, or other identifying information. You have a right to ask the officer for that information. So if you've seen like the legal observers that protest things like that, they're writing down badge numbers and names. You have a right to ask for that information. The video mentioned don't let an officer know, don't ask for an officer's badge number because it's bad for you if they know that you want to file a complaint. Like I said, take some of the stuff in the video with a grain of salt. If you are alone and you're by yourself and you're not recording and you let an officer know that you want to file a complaint, it could be they could retaliate or treat you more negatively because they are pushing for you to not file that complaint. So that's just something to consider. But if you are recording, if you're around other people, then that's not something you have to worry about. It's important for you to know that you are going to hold the officer accountable. You try to find witnesses and their names and phone numbers. If you're injured, seek medical attention and take pictures of the injuries as soon as you can. So that way you have documentation of everything that happened in the incident and in your interaction. And then call a lawyer or contact your local ACLU office. You should be able to make a complaint. You should also make a complaint to the law enforcement office responsible for the treatment. So file a report. You can do that on the website, I believe, of police departments. File a complaint with the badge number and with the name of the officer. And these, I didn't note this before, but all these answers are coming from the ACLU. And I found this on the ACLU Nevada website. And then this document is also in that folder. Okay, this also comes from ACLU, your rights while protesting. So your rights, are there any questions before we move forward with the rights while protesting? That was your rights during arrest and on the street.
Everything's fine.
Why are we talking about 21 Jump Street? This is a class. Stop talking about 21 Jump Street. That is a movie. Talk about movies later. It's
Is
a
it
joke.
right?
Talk about whatever you want. Okay, rights while protesting. What? Okay. Your rights are strongest in what are known as traditional public forums, such as streets, sidewalks, and parks. You also likely have the right to speak out on other public property, like plazas in front of government buildings, as long as you are not blocking access to the government building or interfering with other purposes the property was designed for. So if you are protesting at at City Hall, you are allowed to do that because it's public property, but you might run into problems if you are blocking the door or interfering with their activities. Private property owners can set rules for speech on their property. The government may not restrict your speech if it is taking place on your own property or with the consent of the property owner. Counter-protesters also have free speech rights. Police must treat protesters and counter-protesters equally. And we know they do that. Am I right?
Yeah, especially in Vegas.
Yeah.
Oh my
So,
God.
police are permitted to keep antagonistic groups separated, but should allow them to be within sight and sound of one another. When you are lawfully present in any public space, you have the right to photograph anything in plain view, including federal buildings and the police. On private property, the owner may set rules related to photography or video. You don't need a permit to march in the streets or on sidewalks as long as marchers don't obstruct car or pedestrian traffic. If you don't have a permit, police officers can ask you to move to the side of a street or a sidewalk to let others pass for safety reasons. So you have a right to march on the sidewalk and on the street, and you can't be told not to unless you're obstructing traffic. And then what happens if the police issues an order to disperse the protest? This is something that was very applicable here the past couple months. Shutting down a protest through a dispersal order must be law enforcement's last resort. Police may not break up a gathering unless there is clear and present danger of riot, disorder, interference with traffic, or other immediate threat to public safety. So it's at police discretion as to what constitutes riot, disorder, interference with traffic, unfortunately, but that is the only way that they can provide a dispersal order. If officers issue a dispersal order, they must provide a reasonable opportunity to comply, including sufficient time and a clear, unobstructed exit path. Yeah, so that is something that, like I said, was very applicable at some of the protests here. There needs to be sufficient time to comply before you are breaking any rules, and there needs to be a clear, unobstructed exit path. So if they say go this way, but then they're blocking that way, then legally you could have been dispersing following the law. They can't charge you with failure to disperse if they did not provide you with a clear, unobstructed path
Metro.
and enough time to do that. We're not calling anybody out here. We're going to be very civil. We're not going to talk. We're not going to name names of police departments like Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department in this meeting. Just for example. Lastly, individuals must receive clear and detailed notice of a dispersal order, including how much time they have to disperse, the consequences of failing to disperse, and what clear exit route they can follow before they may be arrested or charged with any crime. So you need to be aware of which way you're supposed to go, how much time you have to disperse, and how to do so before they can charge you with a crime. The police need to give you notice.
Oh, how interesting.
All right. If you are stopped by the police while protesting, stay calm. Make sure to keep your hands visible. Don't argue, resist, or obstruct the police. Remember, this is all about protecting yourself legally. So, the ACLU says, keep yourself out of don't give the police any ammunition that they can use against you. So, point out that you are not disrupting anyone else's activity and that the First Amendment protects your actions. Ask if you are free to leave. If the officer says yes, calmly walk away. If you are under arrest, you have a right to ask why. Otherwise, say you wish to remain silent and ask for a lawyer immediately. Don't say anything or sign anything without a lawyer. You have the right to make a local phone call. And again, if you're calling your lawyer, police are not allowed to listen. You never have to consent to search. Police may pat down your clothing if they suspect you have a weapon and may search you after an arrest. And then lastly, this is important, police officers may not confiscate or demand to view your photographs or video without a warrant, nor may they delete data under any circumstances. However, they may order citizens to cease activities that are truly interfering with legitimate law enforcement operations. So if you're doing something that might be interrupting with their operations, then they can order you to stop that or cease in legal terms.
I actually read somewhere that we shouldn't use like our fingerprints or like our face ID when we go and protest because they can like use that against us too. So we should have like a
Passcode, because they have to have,
they have to
a
ask for
warrant.
that.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
I had read that somewhere, so I can't like quote it obviously, but
Yeah.
No,
if you look it up, you
they
can
do
probably-
need a warrant in order for them to have any access to your phone and or camera.
Mhm.
If it's passcode protected, of course. If we're being honest with ourselves, a camera, they have, the SIM card or battery could be missing.
Mhm.
That doesn't necessarily matter, but yeah, for phones or any devices where you can have a passcode, it's better for you to have an alphanumerical passcode
at
just
least when you
because,
go and protest.
yeah,
Yeah, that is something I wanted to talk about a little bit more today. I didn't look up specific examples, but they do exist, as I've seen on like social media and things like that. But just as like a disclaimer, while we are talking about like legal ramifications and whatnot, when you are protesting, it's a good idea to have your phone on airplane mode. That way, like in Las Vegas, was in the very first like week of protests back in like May and June. There was reports of like aircraft flying around gathering like cell phone data. And so that is something to keep in mind. That way you can't be traced back to being at the protest if your phone's location was on airplane mode because you weren't there, or if you leave your phone at home. That's another thing to consider. I'm not a big conspiracy theorist kind of guy, but also like our government does wild stuff.
And
So
also turn off locations. Like
Yeah.
even if you don't put it on airplane mode, put it on like
turn on
yeah.
the locations.
And then if you're like taking pictures, obviously or live streaming, like never get the faces of people if they're not wearing masks or something covering up.
Right.
Because people will eventually get, picked out.
Yeah. And that can happen at the protest or after the protest. If your face is out on the screen, and if it's in video on social media, then law enforcement can look through that, and then they can build a case against you. And so even if it's not something that's like immediate or happens next week or so forth, if you get in legal trouble later on down the line, then that could come back to you if there is a file on you from videos of you protesting, pictures of you at protests, pictures of you in the street at protests. And then also on social media, be careful of what you post on social media because stuff like that can be used to build cases against people too. Especially right now, there's a lot of talk like U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense building cases on people on like domestic terrorism charges just because of stuff that people say on social media. So even if it's a joke to you, just be careful about the stuff you say on social media.
Some FBI could be like, no.
Yeah,
Who's
the
that?
FBI is
Remember your
actually
rights, not a
building
warrant.
cases. Yeah.
Too.
Rick just said, I think even if you turn off your locations, it'll show your phone is connecting to local cell towers, but I don't know how easy it is to get that information. Local cell towers, all cell towers are actually privatized, so it's really hard to get that information. If you're using location or someone's Wi-Fi or a hotspot, it's a lot easier to get that information because they don't necessarily need to go through the provider to get that. But I know that for at least local cell towers, those are typically speaking privatized, so it'll be a lot harder to get that information.
Are there any other questions or anything else that you want to discuss? Okay, so last two things. Second to last thing is we've already seen the folder tinyurl.com/education over. Feel free to always look back at that folder for information from not only this class but going forward, every class. So you can look for resources, the videos, and things like that, statistics and pictures and stuff in there. And then the last thing that's on this PowerPoint is a video. You can choose to watch it or not. I guess you can choose to do anything or not in life as a philosophy major. That was free will. Anyway, so that last video on the title, So How Does This Work Out? It's just a video showing cops getting owned by people who know their rights and how they're responding to officers when there are interactions. Disclaimer, there's a certain amount of privilege that comes with being able to do some of the things that probably happen in these videos, but it's funny nonetheless to see that police officers in the United States, as we might hear from people who live in other countries as well, don't always know the law as well as they're supposed to know the law and may think that they know more than they actually know. So it is a little bit funny to see them get owned But other than that, that is all. If you have any questions, please let me know. Put it in the chat. Hit the link to subscribe, the button. Throw a thumbs up.
Right here, right there, right there.
And then always happy to hear feedback on how to run the classes better, how to do better, how to look better. Let me know what I can do with my hair next time. Or let me know how to run this class better or what material to choose and things like that. Always happy to hear feedback. Don't just say good job because that doesn't help me. So thank you all, of course, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your night.
Hi, y'all.
What does that say?
Oh, Jesus, where is it? There it is.